you beautiful people, and welcome to the very last installment of our season one, of our seasonal content here on Dual Screens. It's Andy explains it all. I'm Andy, the show's smartest smarty pants idiot, and
Hmm.
I will explain something to Steven, our dumbest idiot. So today you're gonna learn, buddy.
Mm.
And the fun thing is, you have no idea what you're gonna learn about today.
No, Andy, I don't have any idea what I'm going to learn today, and that's because traditionally I pick the topic, you then discuss it with me, and kind of I get to pick your brain about it. I get to prepare a little bit, the questions I might have. But this time we're going in blind, Andy. So this should be interesting. This should be fun.
Yes. So today, I had a couple of ideas for this. My first thought was to present you with two options. One, a horror film franchise that I'm very well versed with, and the
Leprechaun. Okay.
other, right, exactly, Leprechaun, Critters, shit like that. And the other was to give you a horror video game franchise that I know a lot about, that I can talk about as well.
Interesting.
But I decided to do a complete 180, and I changed my mind in the last second.
Ah,
As of about 2 3 days ago, I decided to just upend my entire proposal. I junked all my notes that I've been working on for a couple of weeks, and I went a whole different route.
I guess
And
I guess you don't want to be like known for just the Andy explains horror.
well, it's still horror.
Interesting. Okay.
But it's a franchise that I don't I'm not as in love with as the Freddy's, the Jasons, the Chuckies. But it holds a very special place in my heart. And it gave me a reason to rewatch these films. So
Okay.
today, Steven,
Yes.
I'm gonna explain Candyman to you.
Oh, okay, okay. So yeah, the Candyman is in the news recently. We got the new one coming soon,
Right.
the reboot, as
So
it were.
before I proceed, I'm gonna pour myself a nice tall glass of Harvey's Special Blended Scotch Whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
an English market blend. It
Okay.
is 100% blended whiskey.
Very nice.
I'm just gonna finish that bottle off
And
because
while you were
I can
pouring
tell.
that, I am going to tell you all I know about Candyman.
Yes, please.
Uh, Black.
Great.
Uh,
Black
bees.
bees
He's got a
blood.
hook.
Black bees blood. That's the whole thing.
He's got a hook, and I believe you say Candyman 3 times in the mirror.
That's Bloody Mary.
Yeah, something like that. Don't you
So
have to say his
you're on the
name
right
three
path.
times or
Five
I
times.
don't, five
Five
times?
times.
Okay, something like that.
That's good. That's a good foundation for what this whole series
Now
is about.
that's what I think is true. Now, what I think is false about it is that he is an actual candy salesman.
That is very false.
Because as a kid, I always thought that the whole thing about the Candyman was that he was the guy in a van that your parents warned you about. Don't take candy from strangers. That in a van that
Mhm.
pulls up with the graffitis, on
Free
the side of
candy.
it. Right, the free candy van.
Right.
So that's kind of what I thought he was. I thought he was like a child abductor,
That would make for a nice reboot of the franchise.
like
Um,
if he was actually a Candyman.
like a child predator. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know that there's bees, and I don't know what
Right.
the significance of the bees are.
Well, you can have honey based candies.
Sure. No. Yeah. Oh no, that's an easy
Oh,
tie-in
so
for yeah.
we'll get to the bees and his actual name, where it comes from, all that great stuff. But
Okay.
before we actually dive into this 3 film franchise, a few things we have to first establish before you can actually explain what Candyman is
All
properly.
right.
So you grew up not around, I want to say, a campfire setting, but you heard bedtime stories and tall tales and
Sure.
urban
Sure.
legends. So when I say to you alligators in New York City sewers
Right.
that are blind and albino,
Right.
that is an urban legend.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is the basis for this entire franchise. It lives on what an urban legend is, how it spreads, how it's like the current day folklore in a sense.
Okay.
Um, the
I feel
other
like a
thing
lot
that
of movies do that. No,
right,
like the
yeah,
Babadook and
right. They base it on something that's been passed down for years.
Krampus.
Right. Another thing we should mention is that this franchise has the phrase "sweet to the sweet" in every film.
Uh-huh.
Um, which, when you hear that phrase, it's typically referred to on Valentine's Day, like giving your loved one like candy or
Yep.
sweets because they're your sweetheart in a sense.
Sure.
And it's always bugged me as a Shakespeare nerd because that is a Hamlet thing. It was when Ophelia's mom left flowers on her grave. So it's always bothered me that that phrase gets used in a way to refer to giving candy. It's not really what it's about. That's my little nerd rant. That was why I went to college to learn that. That one
Well,
little thing about Shakespeare.
throw that in your pocket and keep that for
Mm-hmm.
another day.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing we should mention is that these films, at least the first film, was really heavy on social commentary, specifically to the Black community and racism and social inequality and living in the projects and just and snitch mentality, which is where Candyman kind of like stems from as an
Now,
urban legend.
I want to stop you here because I do want to ask
Sure.
you something.
Yes, please.
Did you want to record video of this? Because we normally
Mm.
do, and I'm not, and I
Nah,
forgot.
we cool. We cool. We cool.
Okay. All
We
right.
totally cool.
Continue.
We totally cool. So we begin. The first film takes place in Chicago, appropriately enough, in the early 90s.
Mm.
And we have someone telling our lead character, Helen, who is played, by the way, by Virginia Madsen. Now, you know her, not by name, but my face.
Okay.
She was Cassandra on Frasier. One of the
Okay.
two girls he was
Uh-huh.
in love with is her and Faye.
Right.
And I was watching and I was like, where do I know this face from? It looks like Sharon Stone, but not Sharon Stone. So I did a quick Google. I was like, oh shit, it's fucking Cassandra from Frasier. So that's a little fun fact for you. So she's being told a tall tale about a Candyman murder she had heard about her friend who had a guy come to her house who was
Mhm.
played by a nice cameo by Ted Raimi, Sam Raimi's brother, who was rocking like this leather jacket. He's like the bad boy apparently, which you couldn't find a more like pasty ass white boy to play your tough guy. I don't know how he got cast in that role. I don't know who he knew on that set or in the production area, but he's there as like the resident like bad boy. So she's telling him about Candyman, how if you say his name 5 times in the mirror, he comes and kills you. So they go to the bathroom. Oh, this is all on the pretense of sex. So she wants
Obviously,
him. She wants him to
as
say
everything
it.
is. Yeah.
She
Sure.
wants him to say it to get her all like horned up before she gets hooked up. So they go in the bathroom. He says his name 4 times, and she's at that point like have really getting like into it. And she's like, "No one's gone to 4 before." Like, what kind of fucking sick games do you play, girl? Like, this is what you get you off in the 90s? All right, sure, more power to you. I'm not going to kink shame you. I don't kink shame here in the podcast. So he says it 4 times, and then she asks him to go downstairs to wait for her. She turns around, says the name one last time, and then sure enough, she gets killed. And we see a nice, beautiful shot of blood coming right through the ceiling, as if a hole was there. I don't know how much blood is in a human body, but it would take a while to seep through an upper floor to the first floor.
Yeah.
It's like a bucket was poured through a sheet.
Well, maybe the floor was pulverized.
Perhaps to be the her corpse dissolved it. Could
Yeah.
be.
She has
So-
acid blood. I don't know. There's a lot of options here.
So why is our lead character Helen being told a story about Candyman? Well, Helen is a graduate student that she's doing a thesis on urban legends, which to me sounds like what major do you have?
Yeah, it's a real waste of a thesis.
And that to me is like liberal arts or dance theory. I don't know what that's about, but she essentially goes around gathering stories and just to pad her thesis and get more research. And she eventually comes across a woman a cleaning woman who overhears her talking about Candyman and is like, "Well, there's a girl I knew that's in my building that heard of a girl that got killed years back by Candyman." So she's like, "Okay, cool. Bring her to me. Let's have a discussion. I'm gonna get her facts, get her on tape." So she tells her about a killing of a girl named Ruthie Jean in what was called the Cabrini Green housing projects. Now, again, this goes back. This is an actual place in Chicago, and was chosen for that reason because Chicago at that time had a huge problem with this project because it was known for gang warfare, like crime, and just serious neglect. And there was an actual murder in that building of a girl that was named Ruthie Jean. So it's sort of a little bit based in real life.
I'm
Oh,
sure that
before
made the
and
family so happy.
right, it did. And before I go any further, I should mention that Candyman is based on a short story by Clive Barker called The Forbidden, which was based in Liverpool, and it basically addressed like the economic disparity for those who live in urban areas. So when it was adapted for the States, Chicago was like a good caricature of what we look at when we think about racism, inequality, and justice. It seemed like a perfect fit. So, and again, having the backdrop of the Cabrini Green, which also sort of became like a term that people threw around to refer to like a housing dump, a project dump. It was that bad. It was a notorious housing project. Um, and at some point, it was demolished or sort of rebuilt into condominiums, which is actually in the film as well. So we find out that our lead character Helen is living in the exact housing project that's now been changed over into a condominium where these murders took place in that whole entire project.
Hmm.
So she goes to the project to investigate and speak to some of the people that live there. And we see the social commentary coming into play here because it's heavily black community and it's the Candyman myth has become a clutch for those to hold on to. It's essentially a don't snitch or the Candyman will get you myth. And when we talk about issues of racism and inequality, we also have to go into the other side of things where those people who live in gang warfare areas or there's drug wars going on, it's hard to solve crimes because if a murder happens and you talk to the cops, and then if you're seen talking to a cop in those areas, you will likely get killed. So Candyman became sort of the anchor to keep everyone afraid and to keep their mouth shut if they saw anything go down with regards to crime or murder or drug deals or gang violence. It was just don't say shit or he's gonna get you, Candyman. So don't say shit.
Now
That was like
I got
how the legend grew. But yes, go on.
okay. So how I'm assuming the movie is going to explain how it got from snitching to just saying his name 5 times.
Well, the thing of it is though, Stephen, is we don't learn about what that's all about into the second movie.
Oh, the second
We're
movie.
offered a glimpse into Candyman's origin in the first film, but it goes full on with it in the second movie.
Is he magic?
He is slightly magic.
Okay.
There is
Because
supernatural shit in this
yeah,
franchise.
because those types of horror movies always lose me. Like I feel like those are easier to watch because they're more laughable. Um,
Right?
like except when it's done well enough where you think that the supernatural is just in a person's brain and like it's stuff that they're hallucinating or stuff like that, like The Shining.
Right.
Like when I watch The Shining, it's disturbing because you don't really know what's real, what's fiction, what's all that stuff. But it could be grounded in some kind of reality. Like it's why I always liked Scream or um, Halloween, and it's why I really got away from things like Freddy or Chucky or stuff like that. Like I don't like the fantastical. I like unless it's a true monster film.
Like a Frankenstein or a Dracula
No, I mean those are really aren't
or a
even
Wolfman.
those really aren't scary either. They're more I don't know. I guess if you were a kid back when those were made, it would be scary. But like I consider Friday the 13th a monster movie.
To a certain point.
Yeah, like he's a extraordinarily powerful monster, but I don't
Again,
consider him like teleporting and magic and all that other shit.
right. Like we could go. I don't want to go into Jason right now, but Jason was at the very least up until the fourth film very much a real, living, breathing person, and then he became a zombie. So
You're right.
to a certain extent, he was very based in real life.
Right.
So she goes to the residence, like to the ghetto part of the town of Cabrini Green. It was a huge project, and she lived on the side of the fence where the Gold Coast, what they call what's known as, where the wealthy elites in their condos would stay. That was just beyond the border that the subway station or the rail line would separate. So she goes in the ghetto and to investigate, take pictures and see where this Ruthie Jean murder took place.
In the
And
ghetto.
yes, and she comes across a girl named Anne Marie McCoy, who is a single mother, and she owns an awesome little dog there. He's kind of big actually, not a little. And she tells her about the night of the Ruthie Jean murder, how she could hear screams because it was right across from where she lived. She heard screams, and she dialed 911. And again, knowing where she lived in the ghetto in the projects, no one decided to show up. It was just, listen, you live in a poor community. It's the ghetto. Like you are non people to us, and we're not gonna lift a finger to help you out. It's probably a drug deal gone bad, or just we don't take care of those people. Is what the message there is that they're trying to communicate. Which again, it underscores in the 90s, just like the deep level of racism that was throughout Chicago at the time. So she gets her pictures, gets her story, then she leaves, and then she and her close friend Bernadette go home, and they're just talking about their thesis because they're both working on it together, and they decide to, of course, challenge the myth and recite Candyman's name 5 times in the mirror because he's got to come back somehow. Can't just reappear out of the thin blue.
Can I guess what happens?
What?
They do it, and then there's a silence, and then one goes boo, and then they go ah, and then they go see.
It
I told you
happens,
nothing
I
was gonna
think, in
happen.
almost every single movie. It's the same gimmick. It's like there's that they say it 4 times. There's an awkward pause, and then someone says it, and then it's like you're gonna get a little poke, like, "Oh my god, you scared me! Stop!" So they say it. Of course, nothing happens, but then, as expected, shit starts to get a little weird. So, yes, bees. So Helen is on I don't want to say a double date. She's on a date with her friend Bernadette, or having dinner with her friend Bernadette, her colleague actually, her husband Trevor, who's also a professor at the college she's attending for her thesis, and a gentleman named Philip Purcell, a professor as well. He's like deep in that Candyman lore, and he sort of lays out the backstory about who Candyman is, when the myth started to arise, and his whole backstory, as it were. So Candyman was the son of a slave who worked in a plantation in New Orleans.
Wait, and when does this take? When is this? This is in the 90s. He's the son of a slave.
Right. Well, Candyman's been dead for a while. He was the son of a slave.
Okay. Right. Sorry, I thought you were talking about somebody like alive. Okay.
No. So Candyman, back when he was a living, human, breathing man.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Was the son of a slave.
Okay.
During the Civil War era.
Right.
Right. So, Candyman's father became very well known for inventing a way to mass produce shoes during the Civil War.
Smart. That's real smart.
So because
one would say he might be a soul man.
He was a soul man. So because of this invention, he was able to profit from it greatly, and his son, who became Candyman, had the best life you can imagine, especially for a black boy in that time during the Civil War era. He went to the best colleges. He was a scholar. He was a very evolved person. And at this point, once you get the backstory of Candyman, you're going to see a parallel to another mythic horror figure. And we'll get to that in a second. So, because he was well to do and he could travel the world and study whatever he wanted to study and read, he became a like a world renowned artist, essentially.
Oh, I
Candyman.
thought he was gonna be like a beekeeper.
No, that's got too on the nose. The first film was actually really good. It's really well written. We'll get to the shit ones later on, but let's appreciate one for what it was. Like he
Bees.
got stung by a bee, then he fell off a cliff, and then he was eating a candy bar and he fell into a mirror.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of film I would write. So he was hired all the time by the local wealthy landowners, i.e., white people, to portrait their loved ones, family, or themselves, just because he was so goddamn good at it.
Right.
That little black boy could paint. So
Right.
he was hired by, I believe it was, now we don't know who hired him exactly, but he's given a status in the future film. But the other films sort of have weird writing and retconning, so we'll address that later. So he's hired by one of these landowners to portrait his only daughter. What do you think happens when we have this educated, talented, well-spoken
Oh, he's gonna get framed for her rape and murder.
black boy? I don't know. See that again would have been too obvious. You gotta go the other route.
They
What
fall
happened?
in love.
They fall in love, Steven.
Birds and bees. There's the bees part.
Yeah, not only that, well, birds and bees. They did the birds and bees,
Yeah,
and she
did.
got preggers.
Yeah.
She got full-blown preggers. He put his seed in her, put his honey in her. That sweet honeydew.
He stung her with his stinger.
Ooh, that burns. Got her all pregnant, and then, of course, naturally, we only value the black man up until a certain point. You can paint our pictures, but we can't have you living on our daughters, on our white daughters. So we're gonna have a lynch mob come and track you down.
Sure, as you do in the Civil War era.
Right. Of course. So the lynch mob appears. They track down Candyman, poor Candyman, and they cut off his right hand, as one would do.
That's the hand he jerks off with.
Right.
They want to really nail this one home.
Yes. And then they smear him with honeycombs that were taken from a local apiary, which attracted a whole mess of bees.
Sure.
And they stung him to death.
He was allergic?
No, just too many bee stings, Stephen. Plus, I guess the blood loss too. But in either case, if that didn't kill him, they burned his body, so he was going to make out alive either way.
Uh-huh.
So they burn his body, and they take his ashes, and they scatter them where? On the grounds of what Cabrini Green was later built on. Who would have known?
An ancient
Indian burial ground.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's his little light origin story.
So you just have to nuke it at this point. Just nuke the whole land.
Helen's getting more involved. She goes back to the projects, and she meets a young boy named Jake, who tells her another Candyman story of a boy who was, as he puts it, retarded. And he was...
Now, he put it that way, listener, so don't give us any letters.
No, I am. It's an exact quote from the film. So that's what I'm saying there. Just a quote from the movie. And he was waiting outside for his mom while she was shopping. She was taking her sweet time, I guess looking at things and being overly picky and sort of browsing the whole store. He started to get a little antsy and he started to moan very loudly. And he ran to the bathroom that was in the area, a little public restroom that was in the area. And he was castrated in the bathroom.
Oh.
Yes. Because of course he'd said Candyman 5 times in the mirror. He was in there, and then Candyman came up from the toilet. It looks like based on the shot of the film, and cuts his whole junk off, which was in the toilet, and he dies.
So Candyman here, he doesn't really discriminate or really care if you're good,
Oh,
bad, indifferent. He's
young,
just
old, he's out to kill.
you
He's out
you,
to
you
kill.
say his name 5 times and he's
Five
coming to
times.
get you with his
He's out
crazy
to
hook
kill.
hand
He's out to kill.
and his bees.
Right. So of course, naturally, Helen goes into the very same restroom where this took place. She's taking pictures. The word "Sweet to the Sweet" is on the graffiti on the wall. And then a local gang shows up, and there's a dude with a hook. Not a hook for a hand, it's a hook, a big hook. And he's like, I'm the Candyman, bitch. You found him. She's like, listen, I don't want any trouble. I'm working on my thesis. I'm just going to leave.
Oh, but he
And
said it one time.
right. Well, it's not going to go where we think it's going to go. It's just it's the local gang just trying to say, listen, like, you heard about Candyman killing people? Like, we're the Candyman that's killing people. Like, so don't say shit or we're going to fucking kill you, in a sense. So they proceed to beat her up a lot. And she looks like when they show her eye after this scuffle, it was like she was in a prize fight. Like she
Perfect.
she just went 5 rounds with Apollo Creed. That's how bad it was.
Love it.
So she and the boy Jake go to the local precinct. There's a lineup of 5 black men. They all say the line about being Candyman. They pick him out. The boy also, who is now in a sense ratting out, the guy who did this to her,
Mhm.
is living in fear of the Candyman. Like you
The
betrayed
fake
me.
one.
Right, of the myth, of the legend, because they
Right.
don't know that. Because to these kids and to the whole community, well, the kids think it's a real thing. The adults know that they know what the metaphor is all about. When Candyman's name is
The mentally challenged person, was this a child or a man?
a child,
Okay.
So he's like, you lied to me. I ratted this guy out. I brought him in here. I told him where to find him, and now I'm dead. I'm dead from the Candyman. And she's like, listen, buddy, between you and me, and you can tell your friends too, there is no Candyman. It was just these guys trying to scare you and everyone else into just not ratting out people.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a really awesome line that again sort of highlights the social inequalities between the classes. We have Helen's friend Bernadette, who is black, by the way, saying how we have so much murder happening in this area, but no one lifts a finger. But when a white woman gets punched a couple times, the cops have to arrest somebody. And it's just a perfect line that captures at that time just what people in the urban realm sort of go through
Yeah.
on a daily
I mean,
basis.
there's all that strife. Meanwhile, the Candyman is just
Right.
hanging out in the sewer pipes, just waiting for his name to be
Right.
called.
With the alligators. Just
He's
hanging
kind of
out.
chilling. He's covered in shit and piss,
Right.
menstrual pads.
So life kind of rolls on. And then shit gets real when, as Helen is in a parking lot heading towards her car, the man, the myth, the rumor, the whisper, as he says, is what he is. Candyman shows up.
Without her saying his name.
Well, she already has before. Remember, she did say it 5 times and he didn't show up. So she's already kind of summoned him, but he decided to show up now at this part of the film.
See, that's not fair. You're making up the rules
Right.
as you go along now, Candyman.
Right.
That's not cool.
So he tells her, listen, bitch, and you have the most excellent delivery of lines in Tony Todd, who is the highlight of this entire franchise. As bad as some of these films get, he is the amazing and most consistent thing about the entire franchise. He never hams it up. He's always great. even when his co-stars are trash.
He's just a cold
He's
killer.
just that good. And he tells her straight up, "Listen, you've kind of besmirched my reputation because now no one thinks I'm real. You're killing my myth, my congregation, as what he refers to as the residents of the projects. If they're not going to fear me, then I can't exist. I can't thrive. And we have to make this right. We really must make this right. So we're going to stoke some fear." So she sort of passes out after he cuts her, and she wakes up in the projects of that woman, Miss Anne Marie, and she's in her bathroom and she's covered in blood. Helen. She has no idea how she got there, but there's a cleaver on the floor next to her. And she can hear Anne Marie screaming bloody murder from the other room. She opens the door and she sees her dog's head on the floor, just chopped off. It's like a bloody stump.
Perfect.
Anne Marie sees her and is like, "Bitch, you killed my dog! It was you! What are you doing here?" And her son's missing, little Anthony. Is also at this point, he's gone astray. So they have a squabble. She gets pinned down. Helen is trying to defend herself because she's sort of caught off guard, like, I don't know how I got here. Has the cleaver and strikes her in the arm. And at that moment, the cops show up. And Helen is in a really bad spot because it looks like you killed this bitch's dog, you kidnapped her kid, and you assaulted her. So we gotta take you in and arrest you for some shit. At this point, we get a nice shot of side boob in the police station.
Sure.
Not that much. This film's heavy on the gore, but not heavy on the nudity.
Well, it's not the 80s.
And it's a very classy film. Very classy movie. And she's taken in, she's questioned, and she says she sticks to her guns. "Listen, I don't know how I got there. It was the Candyman." "Okay, sure. We're going to call your husband. We're going to have him post bail. And we're going to get you home." And she gets home. So she gets home, and once again, our friend Candyman shows up, and he's determined to get her to believe that he's real and to just spread more fear that he is real and that when you snitch or when you do bad things, he'll get you, the Candyman.
Or if you are just mentally challenged and run into a bathroom.
Right. Exactly. So when he shows up again, of course, as it was, her good friend Bernadette shows up. Bernadette was just at the wrong place at the right time for Candyman. So he murders her to death. And then cops show up. And, well, now you've killed someone, Helen. So we're going to lock your ass up. And she's talking about Candyman. "No, it wasn't me." So naturally, they sedate her. And she goes in the psych ward. For a whopping month. A month goes by. She's kept on lockdown and drugged up to see if she can even be at her upcoming trial. So, she is in the mental hospital, and she's talking to her doctor, who is kind of doing a little evaluation of her to see where she stands with her mental faculties, as it were. And she's tied to the chair that she's restrained in the chair she's sitting in while she's speaking to him and doing her evaluation. And Candyman shows up and she kills the doctor and sets her free. I was like, "Come on, and if you want the baby, you got to come find me because I have the baby." So she goes out of the window, which he breaks for her, and now it looks like that she's killed the doctor. Obviously.
Oh my God, I've solved it, Andy. I solved the movie.
I don't think you did.
I did. I solved it.
I don't think you did.
Well,
you may think you solved it, but I don't think you did.
I think I solved it.
All right. So she goes out the window to the next room over. She knocks on the window and the person that's in there is like, "Oh, why is there a random patient with blood on them knocking on the glass? I'll let them in." So she lets her in from the window. Helen headbutts her, strips her of her nurse's uniform, and escapes the hospital.
I've solved this whole movie, Andy. I've come to the conclusion that doing her research for her thesis, she has become completely insane and obsessed with the research and has created the Candyman persona for herself, and she's performing all of these murders uh, as a split personality.
See, that would have been nice. It's a little too Fight Club at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, that was also as a fun side fact. The initial plot of Child's Play. They were going to have Andy Barkley, the little boy in that movie, be totally batshit insane, and Chucky be just a figment of his imagination. That it was
Yes.
him doing the murders.
That would have been better. That would have been better.
Second fun side note. There's a film you should watch called Pinocchio's Revenge.
Oh yes.
That adopts that exact plot. It's a killer doll, but it was spoilers. It was the little boy the entire time. But you're wrong. Helen is very much an innocent in all this, and she's trying to get the baby back from the Candyman.
Gotta get the baby.
So the first place she goes is back to her house, and she sees a young girl painting her apartment in a color that can only be described as someone going to Benjamin Moore and saying, "Yeah, do you have like a Pepto Bismol color?"
Ew.
It is the most horrid color selection. I'm not big on fashion or decor or design in that sense, but it is just this vomit-looking pink of a color. So she's painting the place, and who is this girl? You might ask. Well, she's Stacy, one of her husband's students that he's been banging the entire time throughout their whole marriage.
Oh my.
But has now, since her incarceration and confinement in the loony bin,
1 month.
has convinced her to move in with him, and he has her painting the whole place. I gotta take a drink for this guy. That's like some skills
I
to
mean,
have
your
like a
wife
young
is a murderer and
right
awaiting trial. I mean, you don't believe she's innocent, clearly.
homeboys in a bathrobe, and this bitch is painting.
Pink, no less.
Right. So, she's like, "Fuck you, I'm out." She bounces, and then Helen goes back to the Cabrini Green to confront Candyman, and he says to her, "Listen, like, I'll give you the baby, but I want you to take its place. Like, I'm gonna offer you immortality, um, with me, in a sense, in exchange for the baby." And he opens up his little trench coat, shows his rib cage. It's full of bees. The bees, the bees.
There they are, the bees.
And he gives her a nice passionate kiss. Bees pour into her mouth, and down her gullet, as it were. He disappears, and then at that point, Helen discovers a mural of Candyman's lover, the one who he knocked up in the Civil War, his beloved Carolyn Sullivan, who bears a striking resemblance to Helen.
Striking.
And it turns out, Stephen, that Helen is the reincarnation of Caroline.
Perfect.
And
Yes, obviously.
we start to see that Candyman is very much a Bram Stoker's Dracula. He is very sympathetic. He was wronged. He had his life taken from him, his work, his art, his love, his child.
Mhm.
And he's a very tragic figure. And in a lot of ways, Candyman was Dracula to the black community. He was their Dracula, more so than Blackula was.
Sure.
So he's like, all right. So she sees the mural, and it all starts to click with her, like why she was chosen in a sense. And the whole thing for Candyman is to get his congregation to fear him, and he wants her to help him stoke that fear in exchange for the baby. So he has placed the baby Anthony in a massive bonfire outside the Cabrini Green, which was meant as like a celebratory, like we're gonna burn some shit and have a good time by a massive flame, open flame. Like that's always a good idea in the project. So it's to burn a bunch of shit. And he's at the center of this bonfire, the baby. So Helen hears him crying. She goes in to get him. And Candyman's like, "I tricked you, bitch. That we're all gonna die in the fire because we'll all be a family. I have my lover or my lover lookalike, and I have a child, and we can all live together in the afterlife as one family. And my legend, my myth can live on, and all be fine and dandy." Of course, Helen's like, "I'm not gonna take your shit, buddy." She stabs him with a stake. Well, it's like a piece of wood that's on fire. He kind of moans a little bit, kind of takes a step back. She grabs the baby and bolts. And a bunch of wood that's on fire falls on her, and she gets horribly burned. Her hair burns off, and she crawls out of the bonfire to deliver the baby to her mom, which is standing right there. Coincidence. So she dies. Baby gets back to mama. Candyman dies in the fire. And we now flash to Helen's funeral. We see her husband, and who's brought his student lover bitch with him at the funeral again. This guy's
got balls.
This guy got the biggest fucking balls. I kid you not. I can't get over it. I was watching like he's a real piece of work. So he's with his lover, and they're saying, let's remember Helen for what she was, not for the thing that she did. And then we see the entire crowd of Cabrini Green residents show up marching to pay their respects to Helen because they know that she was right and she's not what they think she is, not a killer, and she was actually trying to save one of their own. So they symbolically toss Candyman's hook into her grave.
Oh, you got to get rid of that.
Wait, it's not what you think.
That's the eyeball of Chucky. That's the mother's sweater.
That's Freddy's glove. That's the Exorcist vomit. Damn it. So we flash to a scene in Helen's husband's house. He's now with his lover. She's making him some dinner, and she's being an absolute cunt. Like, really mean to him about having him help her make the salad, and she's being a real bitch, a real bratty little bitch to him. Because he's in the bathroom, I guess, semi-grieving his wife's recent death. And then the guilt hits him of cheating on his wife, how she was actually really good for him and she took care of him. We see a little flashback of him being nice to him, making him a nice candlelight dinner, which happened earlier in the film. And he's like, fuck, like I could have stood by my wife and helped her through this and believed her, but I chose some young Pepto-Bismol selecting color bimbo who is now just a brat and is the bane of my life. So he's looking in the mirror and he's crying and he says, Helen. He says it 5 times. And wouldn't you know, we have Helen now showing up with her burned up head and the hook in her hand, and she totally guts him to death. Just eviscerates him.
Candy woman.
Candy lady.
Candy girl.
Candy girl. And then Pepto-Bismol bitch rolls in, she yells, and the film's over. And that's it. And now we get one final shot of Candyman's lair, his former lair in the Cabrini Green, now with a new mural of Helen sort of rising from the fire as she's the new local folklore in a sense. She's the new Candyman, urban legend, and that's the first film. Again, it's an amazing movie. It really captures again like the folklore aspect, the whole the racism and the injustice. It was a really great film for its time. And some fun facts about this film before we go on to part two. It had a very small budget of $8 million and grossed about 23 or 24 million, which is big for the 90s. Um, enough to warrant a sequel and a whole full blown franchise after the fact. The producers of the film were a bit nervous of the connotations of putting a black actor in a negative light. Now, this cracks me up. You have a bunch of white liberal producers saying, is it cool that we have a black character that's not like who is such a villain? Like he's a ghost, he's a killer. Like this doesn't look right. This seems racist to us. They actually sent the movie's director to meet with the NAACP to get, I guess, their blessing to make this movie. To which they said, this meeting is pointless. This sounds really badass. Like, we get our own Dracula. Yeah, fuck it, go for it. Like, why are we here? Go make your movie. Like, just shed your white guilt and make the movie. It sounds awesome. So I always found that fact kind of funny about this movie. Yes. Any questions so far?
I mean, yeah. The kiss with the bees in the mouth, did that do anything? Is that when he transferred his power to her?
It's not about a power transfer. It's more of a, just a symbolic, like, you're my love, and that's why I want you with me. That's why I sought you out. I guess when she died, and that's where she kind of maybe got the ability. I don't know. And plus, she's a reincarnation of his lover. It's very gray. It's just, you just got to go with it.
Also, what are the rules of the afterlife? Because he thinks he's going to be able to spend the rest of his afterlife with his lover and child, but like clearly he's not in some sort of paradise. He's coming back to Earth murdering people. Unless he is. Is he in heaven? Is he a demon?
We don't know. We don't know. He exists on some plane where he's fine and dandy up until the point where his reputation gets somewhat tarnished, and he must.
What do you mean fine and dandy?
He demands justice.
He gets summoned by somebody just innocently saying his name, having the balls to say his name 5 times.
Yeah, but listen, he's got bees and a hook arm, so there's that.
Yeah, I guess.
You know what? Whatever torment he's going through, he doesn't want to be alone, Steven. And he was robbed of his love and his child, so he just wants to get that back in some way, however way he possibly can. So we open in Candyman 2. Candyman 2, well, it's Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, was released in 95, just a few years after the first movie. And whatever social commentary or just the underlying messaging about racism and inequality, that's all gone now. That's all done. That all goes away. And we're gonna go for a straight supernatural slasher film for the sequel.
Gone as any nuance.
We are shifting focus from Chicago. We are now in New Orleans. And we're just about the time for Fat Tuesday. Mardi Gras is upon us, and Mardi Gras, as you know, it's the day before Ash Wednesday. It's a big blowout party before Lent, and everyone gets fat and happy, and just it's an overindulgence of everything in Mardi Gras. And we have our professor friend from the first film, who explained to us the backstory of Candyman at a local book signing in New Orleans. He's talking about the Candyman myth. He's hawking his new book. And we have a guy show up named Ethan who is very pissed at this professor because apparently Ethan's dad tried to call him with help about Candyman, and he was dismissed as being, listen, he's just a myth. He's just an urban legend. Don't buy into the hype. Don't take it seriously. His dad was later killed or died in mysterious circumstances, and Ethan's out for revenge. Like he's got a grudge against the professor. So professor is at his book signing. And his book jacket is it's a mirror. So of course, in his little speech to the crowd that he's giving his little talk to, he's goaded by one of the attendees to say Candyman's name 5 times. Because if it's not real and if it's all just a myth, prove it. Just prove it. Because we got to have the name. We got the summoning happen at some point. So he says the name, and then later on, he gets killed in a public bathroom.
They should have he you know what he should have done for a speech? He should have made everybody open their copy of the book to the mirror and everybody say it at the same time 5 times. and then just sit there and not leave.
Here's the thing. He doesn't go after those who say the name. He's just been summoned. So he can kill those who don't say the name. Like Bernadette from part 1 didn't say his name. She didn't summon him. Helen did. But he's now a physical body in our.
How long does the summon last?
Oh, I guess until he dies. I don't know. There's no exact science to it. There's no science to it. It's all booga booga mugumbo at this point. That's what it all is. So, the professor dies, and of course, naturally, we have Ethan as the prime suspect because you got into a public squabble with him, and you're a little Candyman obsessed. He was killed in a similar fashion. He was sort of split from like groin to throat in a sense. So he's now under arrest for suspicion of murder, and his sister Annie shows up to sort of like see what's going on. She's a school teacher, by the way, and to sort of understand why he was arrested. Plus, her brother has confessed to the murder. He's innocent though, but he's confessed to it.
And she's he doesn't want to snitch.
Right. He's like, I'm not going to buy this shit. Like, I think you're full of it. I'm on the case. So we get now an even deeper look into Candyman's backstory. We learn about the mirror. We learn about the name. We learn about all of it. And this is where shit gets really, really batshit supernatural.
Dun, dun, dun.
Crazy. So Candyman, or as his real name, Daniel Robitaille, was again the son of a slave on a plantation in New Orleans. That's where he was born. And then at some point, he ended up going to what became Chicago. Not sure when he made that trek, but I guess in his travels, he ended up in the Chicago area. Meets Carolyn. They fall in love. Knocks her up. Lynch mob. We get an actual depiction of his death in this film. So he's smeared by the honey from the local apiary. And we see just like a swarm of bees appear out of nowhere. Like they're like a good mile down the road. I guess they smelled the honey.
Sure, it's got all the pheromones. It's got all the pheromones, right?
It's like a massive blob of bees. And while he's being slathered up in the honey, by the way, some of it gets on a little boy's face. So he decides to pick up with his finger, lick it, and taste it, and says, "Candyman! Candyman!" And they all start chanting Candyman, and that's where the name comes from. So, bees come, they sting him up. He's all fucking bitten and bloated and gross looking. And then Carolyn shows up, just like imploring all of them, "Please stop, don't do this. What have you done? I love this man." And they're like, "No, how could you love him? Look at him." And her father, who is just happens to have Carolyn's mirror with him at the time, shows Candyman's reflection and says, "How could she ever love you now that you look like this. So on his dying breaths, Daniel says the words Candyman as he looks in the mirror, effectively trapping his soul in that mirror. Carolyn picks it up. She sees his reflection, thinks, shit, he might be alive in this mirror. I'm taking it with me. She moves back to New Orleans in his old house, his birth house, by the way.
His slave house.
Right, his slave house. Hides the mirror and has her baby, who's her name is Isabel, and lives her life in the house. So the next major revelation is that our good friend Annie here, our lead character, our lead female, turns out to be a direct descendant of Isabel. Not only that, the house she lives in was Candyman's house.
Of course it was.
Oh, I'm sorry, the house she grew up in was Candyman's house.
Sure. The mirror is probably in a crawl
And-
space somewhere in the floorboard.
Yes, and apparently, yeah, and apparently, her father, who again died under weird circumstances, he was trying to connect his wife's family because that's the connection. It was he married into the Candyman bloodline.
Oh boy. Okay.
Ethan and Annie's dad, and he was trying to figure it out, like the connection. And then his wife Octavia didn't want any part of it. He's like, "You will not connect us to this horrible man and the myth and the legend. I won't have it." And she just denied him and just ignored him and called him insane and kooky. Like she was trying to stop him, and then he died. And then Carolyn found out that the mom was semi-complicit in all this. Candyman shows up and kills her mom because I try to understand, like, he has a weird thing with hunting down family or bloodline in the future in later films. If he kills the mom in a heartbeat, and she's also of his bloodline as well. In any case, let's not dwell on the logistics here too much.
Yeah, I mean that's really honestly that's the hardest part about really liking or like it's the hardest part about getting behind him as like the main killer because he doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason, and I think that's actually hurting his mystique.
Right. The big part of it is he can't exist without the fear of his myth thriving. And there's also the other element of wanting to sort of collect, like Pokemon, all of his family to be with him in his twisted afterlife. Like he wants them to suffer with him for some reason. Like that's what they're his blood. It's like
well, it's also the guy. It's also his father. Well, the father of his lover. That blood is in there too. So maybe he's trying to cleanse the world of that blood.
Right, and it's also when you think about it, it's as a son of a slave owner, we have a black man who is now getting a bunch of white people to be his slaves in the afterlife, because he will still rule them in that afterlife, which we'll see in a future movie. So mom is dead, and then Annie just sort of is at her wit's end now, and she tries to get to Candyman's original home, her childhood home. Along the way, her brother Ethan is shot dead in the head during an interrogation, so that's gone. And also, he's also his blood, technically, Ethan. But let's focus on the girls, on the nice young blonde girls, because that's our bread and butter.
Those go on the poster.
Yeah, those go in the slave pile. So she makes her way back to her birth house, Candyman's childhood home as well, and she finds the mirror in the basement, because where else is it going to be beside the basement?
Oh, I was thinking floorboards.
And he tells her, "This is the source of my resurrection. Without this mirror, I can't come back. So please join me in the afterlife. Let me kill you, and we could spread the fear together. So she destroys the mirror.
She's like,
And
yeah, I've been
right,
thinking about it, and I decided, no, I'm not gonna let you
right.
kill me.
She pulls it off the wall, smashes it, and Candyman dies with the mirror. The the slave quarters crash into a river. It all goes to hell. And then we flash to I forgot to mention that our friend Annie here was married to a really nice guy named Paul, and Paul was killed at some point
R.I.P.
in the
Paul.
film. And he also knocked her up along the way.
Ah.
So we cut to 5 years later. We have Annie with their daughter, who is named Carolyn. Because what else would she be named at this point? And she starts to chant Candyman's name in her bed. Annie walks in, stops her, says, "Hey, you cut that out. Just go to bed." And that's where it ends. So as a sequel, it builds on the lore of the first film, which is great. It drops all the social commentary, which again, it's at that point, how much of that do you want in the franchise, without it being like just it was great the first time, but again, you have now a new writing team, new directors. A few fun facts before we get on to part three. There was a pitch for a Candyman sequel from the original writer that involved it being a prequel to the first movie that kind of dove into Candyman's life before he became Candyman. How he became like a free man and educated. But it was turned down because studios at the time didn't want to portray an interracial love story.
Of course.
They thought it was too much.
Oh yeah, really.
The audience
We still can't handle it.
That well, more so now than we could 30 years ago.
Right. Just imagine the internet still gets in a fucking uproar over it. Anyway, so
I just love how you have again the same bunch of white producers saying, should we not portray a black man in a bad light, and then say we can have a black guy with a white lover? It's like it's blasphemy. Like people can handle that.
It's weird.
But again, it's like it's you're making again like people around the country won't and can't handle that. Us being in New York, we grew up with that all around us, so it's not like it's a new thing to us. Like the idea of an interracial couple to us as New Yorkers isn't the most bizarre idea or like frowned upon.
Right.
But you go in the South, and in the South, it's a big deal. But again, it's making the assumption that most moviegoers couldn't handle that, which is a shame because if you took a chance on it back then, maybe things could have been better race relations wise in the current year. Just some food for thought. And now, Stephen, we move on to the third film,
the cream of the crop,
a film that's so good it was straight to DVD.
Yes. Not even VHS, so this was during DVD era times.
Right.
I love it.
Right. So, what this movie does that the other ones failed to do in such a remarkable way. We had some side boob in part one.
We did.
Very briefly. There was a snippet of side boob in part two, again, very briefly.
Okay.
Part three goes full tits.
Wow, okay.
Full
well,
tits,
the DVD,
multiple tatas. It's just there's multiple tits, multiple scenes. There's living tits, tits about to be killed, dead tits, all kind of tits in this movie.
Candyman is
covered in blood, covered in bees. It's just tits every which way you can imagine.
This reminds me of like I assume this came out around the same time as like all of those Crow sequels that went straight to DVD.
In '99, so that I would say yes.
Yeah, it's about.
I guess someone thought at Artisan Entertainment that we should buy out the rights of this franchise and make a movie and put it on DVD. God bless Tony for being on board because he's the only good thing about this movie. I feel because he's classic Candyman. Like No matter you put him against a really bad green screen job with bees behind him, he still looks good.
He's still Candyman.
He still slays. He still slays. So it is now several years post the last film. We are now in the lovely city of Los Angeles,
Ah, Los Angeles.
and we're approaching the Day of the Dead, which is the movie's tagline, Dia de los Muertes.
Yes,
As
of
you
course.
know. So the first film doesn't want to have big reveals. We start with our main lead character, Carolyn McKeever, who is now semi grown up from the second film when we last saw her in the closing scene. And she's like, "My name is Carolyn. My great great granddaddy was Candyman." I'm like, "Okay, we're just going right for it now. We're just gonna get right to it.
Get right
No
in.
mystery. You're not gonna let us kind of wonder."
No, you have the whole rest of the film
Yeah,
to build
right.
wonder.
So, and she works for an art gallery.
Oh,
Yes, and
it's the frame.
said art gallery is showing off the entire body of work of our good friend Candyman.
Dun dun dun. He's
All
in the
of it,
painting.
all of his portraits, all of it is just on full display. And again, it's like it's the eve of Day of the Dead, and it's like a semi ghost attraction
Sure.
where the owner can just kind of build on the hype and the legend and get a bunch of wealthy at least to spend some money and to enjoy a night of merriment. And of course, Carolyn's like, "Listen, these are my paintings. I lent them to you for the gallery, but I wanted to have my family be remembered for what they were and not the legend. Like you're exploiting the urban legend to make a quick buck." And the gallery owner Miguel is like, "Buddy, baby, sweetie, pussy lips.
Sweetheart.
Trust me. We're gonna make bank. We're gonna make so much money." And when the time comes, you can step in and say, "Here's the actual backstory of Daniel Robitaille and Candyman," and you can cast him in a much better light. But let's just make some money here. Uh, we're introduced early on to a pair of just the most racist ass detectives you can imagine. It's like, think if you were to sit down and I asked you to write the most insanely racist things to have a character say, these guys say it. It is so overblown, and it's like, again, it's like a caricature. Like they call Miguel. The term wetback is used in the film several
Sure,
times.
sure, sure.
At one point, they say to one of their fellow detectives, who's a black man, to go shoot some hoops.
Yeah, they're going
Like,
for it.
how did you not throw a bottle of grape soda at his head or lob some fried chicken at him? Like, it's so over the top. But again, you want to hate these guys. And it frames how the film ends perfectly. So, it is the night of the gallery opening, of the exhibit, I should say. And people are all there. And of course, as happens with any of these Candyman films, someone is dared to say his name in the mirror. Because, hey, if he's not real, and if you're going to defend him, Carolyn, to all these people, you can say his name, right? So the bitch says it. And um, an actor that Miguel hired shows up to scare everybody. Who is played by, I forget his name, Nick Corey, who was in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. He was the boyfriend of Tina. He was Rod, who was in the bedroom with her when she got dragged on the bedroom ceiling. I was like, "Oh fuck, that is fucking Nick Corey." So he's acting ish again, and he's in the movie, and he's playing an actor, which is ironic. And scares the whole audience, and then scares Carolyn, and it's all just a goof for everybody. Don't worry about it. It's all fake.
Or is
So
it?
she goes home, and then what happens next? Candyman shows up in the subway in some bad green screen. There's bees behind him, the whole flock of bees, bee swarm, and she's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I am your blood. I am I am you. Join me in the afterlife. Be with me. I came for you.
Be
Be mine."
be with me.
Dude, that would be an awesome fucking sequel. Candyman, be mine. Oh, if you're listening, Tony, make it happen.
We can write it.
Make
It
it
can
happen.
be done.
We will write it. So he's like, "You don't believe that I'm real, but I'll make you believe." So, of course, Candyman shows up in Miguel's house while he's banging his assistant chick at the gallery. I think we get more tits, by the way.
Yep, there they are, boobs.
Full blown tits.
The boobs are here.
She gets covered in bees.
Covered in bees and boobs and blood.
Bees in the boobs. And then Miguel gets from his back, Candyman grabs him. There's old hook action. We can see how this is very much a made for TV movie in a sense, because the hook arm looks like a less bloodier stump. It's not as ragged as it was in the previous two films. It has a very cheap quality to it.
Mm.
Again, Tony's a rock star, and he takes in his strides, low budget or not, and he still just rocks it. I mean, he's why we're hooked on these movies. I hate myself.
Wow.
Okay, moving on. So I've had too much to drink. So two are now dead, and Carolyn's like, "It's Candyman. It's Candyman. I can't believe it. He's back. He's real. Yada yada." So she sort of is starting to believe now that he's real, and Candyman decides to kill some more to convince her that he's real. But she knows he's real. Like, she's already accepted that he's real.
Well, she doesn't believe that he's back.
She didn't accept it fully
right
on yet.
Like, no, I killed you. You're gone. This can't be you. I took away your portal to this plane. This can't be real. It's not you. He's like, oh, well, I am, sir.
Right. So she gets help from the actor, friend of Miguel's, David, who has a daughter named Christina, and he needs him to help her solve the crime because he was Miguel's boy, and he knows that he wasn't caught up in no bad dealings. And when you have racist cops who don't give a shit about you, about another quote unquote wetback dying, he won't let his boy go down like that. So he's on board. Listen, we're gonna solve the crime. We're gonna get Candyman. Let's do this. And of course, he takes her to his aunt, who is naturally an old Hispanic shaman healer lady.
Right. She's got healing. Yeah, she could channel the dead.
He tells her she'll help you. She'll break the curse of your family. To listen to her. So this old lady, I wish I could be making this up, but she has like a cigar in her mouth and like stands over her and takes a really long drag over her head, sits back down, and then just recites some Spanish to her. And you're watching in disbelief, like what is going on? And then she tells her about death is following her, death can't escape her, and all this stuff. And then she has her speak the evil's name into an egg, which she says in perfect English, mind you.
An egg?
To the egg, yes.
Like out of the refrigerator?
Yes, an egg.
Like an... Okay. All right.
She then cracks the egg into a bowl.
Cooks it. Makes
an omelet, no. And there's a little drop of blood on the egg yolk. And she says, one of the best lines in the whole movie, she says, evil cannot exist without good. The one can't exist without the other. You said the same thing twice.
So you're
So
gonna need to be a real bad bitch.
yes, so she's having a hard time breathing because apparently being around that much evil energy, it got to her
Or the
cardiac
cigar
issues.
smoke.
Oh yeah, for that. Like, I gotta go cough up a loogie. Where's my respirator? So she walks off, and then with David, and we get a nice little shot of the egg yolk bleeding more and more, and then bees come out of it. But it was all an illusion. It's all daydream. Which also, by the way, I want to add these films. What they do that the first film did not do a lot of, fucking jump scares. Every other minute,
Yeah.
there's just jump scare after jump scare.
Bees.
Yes. So in the hunt, in the pursuit of Candyman, and to sort of find out what's going on, we learn about Carolyn's mom, Annie, from the previous movie. After all she went through to stop Candyman and kill him and to live with her daughter peacefully, took her own life because she was afraid that Candyman would get her daughter. So she told him, "You can take me and leave her alone," which makes a whole lot of sense. And we get a nice shot of her mom dead with her throat slit and bloody boobs.
Right.
That's happening.
Because if you're gonna kill yourself, it's
right.
gotta
And
do it naked.
I mentioned before about there's like weird retconning in this last film, and it's a note for all you filmmakers out there that want to revive an old franchise. Well, it's easier now because the new hot shit is let's watch the first movie and write a sequel and ignore all the other garbage that came after it.
Right. I mean, it's very rare that you get a good sequel to
Right.
a
And
lot of movies.
that's actually, before we get to the end of this, is the premise of the Candyman reboot coming out. I think it's this year or was pushed to next year because of what's going on around the world. It's a spiritual sequel to the first movie, which brings back Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen. So
That's pretty cool.
right, which I cannot wait. And you got Jordan Peele on that shit. Hell yeah, sign me up. So mom, bloody boobs, and we find out that she sort of gave her life to protect her daughter in a sense, which you could just not have told her about Candyman, and it should have been fine. But we gotta drive this plot somehow. We're gonna have a big revelation at some point. That's all we got. That's all we got. So we come across the next relic that served as the vessel for his resurrection. Because apparently it wasn't the mirror. It wasn't the mirror that housed his soul when he died.
It was the frame.
It was the his own portrait.
Oh. His own portrait.
Right. So as all these films go, we have Candyman who doesn't know how to learn about shit. He doesn't quite learn his lessons from previous experiences. He feels like he's tried to get women to be with him in the afterlife. They all have said no, and they've all ended up killing him. What made him think that this would be any different?
Maybe it's just a tortured soul thing. Like he keeps
Right.
doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
Just because that's what his tortured soul is programmed to do.
So she's like, fuck this shit, I don't want to be with you, and she destroys the painting, which was the cause of his resurrection. She uses his hook to destroy the painting. He bursts into flames. He dies. But we have to wrap up the series because as long as there's the myth, the rumor, the legend, he could live on, which really is what makes him live on. I don't get this whole mirror frame portrait shit because, like Freddy Krueger, Candyman thrives on fear and the energy that fear gives off that gives him life in a sense.
Yeah, but I guess
so these
it's
weird
just,
weird plot devices. It's like
it's a MacGuffin.
Yeah, it's a classic trope like the relic we have to destroy, defeat the evil. I get it. So we have Candyman's dead. We're gonna wrap up this whole myth situation. So Carolyn's with David, and he's been injured, and she helps him up. And then we see our good old racist detective shows up, and he starts attacking them because he's like, this lousy brown person must be behind all of it, and he's attacking that white lady. But wait, she's also fucked up and bad because she turned me down before, and I wanted to fuck her. So I'm gonna try to kill them both with this hook that I happened to find nearby. So as he's trying to attack them with the hook, another detective shows up. The one that was asked to play hoops earlier, by the way. And he shoots hyper racist cop in the back of the head. And as he dies, he says the words Candyman. Now, I'm not sure how one can speak when they're shot in the back of the head, but hey, he pulls it off. Flying colors.
Yeah, the brain is a very complex organism.
Yes, it is. So he says the words Candyman, and at that point, she remembers Carolyn that to really destroy him is to destroy the myth of Candyman. Why she had to exchange her life makes no sense now. She could have just told her daughter that the myth is dead. It was never real. Case closed. But again, we can't stop to explain these things. So in that moment, Carolyn decides to tell our super awesome black cop friend that the entire time, all the murders, all the killings, it was all racist cop's fault. So he now takes the blame for all the murders, and the myth of Candyman dies with him. So,
or does it? Or is he now the Candyman?
Well, as we end the film, Carolyn decides to test everything. Finds a mirror and says his name to make sure he's dead. And of course, he busts through with his hook. He's back. But it's a jump scare. It was all a nightmare. It never happened. So,
that's so cheap when they do that.
Right. And she has a picnic with her now boyfriend David with their lovely daughter. And it's now the Day of the Dead. And
Basketball cop?
Basketball cop? He's no. David, the actor.
The actor. Got it. Okay, that's right.
Now they're convinced that Candyman is no longer a thing, and all is well in the world. And that is Candyman. Any questions, Steven? Any questions? I know you got tons.
Well, I mean, the plots themselves don't seem terrible.
Right.
The third one seems like it falls from terrible dialogue, kind of predictable bullshit,
it just,
movie tropes.
There's no evolution. It's the same story sort of retold with just different family members.
And different ways to, or like, oh no, this was how you get rid of them.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But it sounds like the best part of Candyman is Candyman, and everything else around it is kind of just window dressing.
Right. He is the reason why you watch, because like I said before, Candyman is a character that never, no matter how many writers are in this thing for the entire franchise, Candyman's character was very consistent. He never got, like, if you look at a Chucky or a Jason or a Freddy, who was at one point very dark and got darker in the second movie, became full one-liner Bugs Bunny by the time the sixth film rolled around. It was like Looney Tunes one-liners by the time he died, quote unquote.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that that horror movies became fun events for people and their friends to go to,
right,
rather than
schlock and just entertainment. It
right.
wasn't like it wasn't about scaring people. Like in the 80s, it was about let's have fear, word of mouth, buzz, and this will scare the pants off you. But by the time you evolve that 10 years down the line, it's, well, is it really scary anymore for that same audience that grew up with this character?
Right. We just want to go with our friends, get some scary stuff, see some gruesome things, and laugh.
And just have a good time.
And laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Right.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. When I was a kid, I always thought of Candyman as like a C list type of from that era, I guess. Um, but it seems like he's probably, at least the way the killer is portrayed, he's probably better than some of the what I would consider B tier, or C, yeah, other C tier. Like I look at the other guy with the hook, the Gordon Fisherman from I
Oh,
Know What You
from
Did Last Summer.
I know you did last summer. Yeah, the Gordon Fisherman.
I look at him and I'm like, he kind of sucked. The Jeepers Creepers, that one.
Oh, that weird winged thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I mean that was just whatever.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I feel like now we're in a point now in horror where it's more of it's like a race to see who can reignite true fear in movie theaters. Like, it kind of started with Paranormal Activity, and then even those became a clown show, and
Right.
Saw did it, and then that became a clown show.
Hmm.
um but I don't know, man, it's just weird. Like, what is it about horror franchises that just become clown shows by the time they move on? It's just like, I understand that you're making movies for the people that have seen the other movies, like that's the purpose of a sequel, and you're hoping that people since the movie prior have watched it in other mediums and now will go to the movie theater and spend money, and all that fun stuff. I mean, it's the same thing with a movie that I've been watching over and over again, is the Ninja Turtles movies. Like, the first movie was so cool, so awesome, dark. It was gritty. It had adult themes, kidnapping. Uh, Raphael saying "damn," and I'm pretty sure there was a
Damn.
yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a shit in there too. Um, and it had gangs and children being smoking, and I don't know. It was just a really cool dark movie. And then less than one calendar year later, they make the second movie, and it becomes dick and fart jokes.
Right, and we're not using our weapons at all because they're not kid friendly.
Right, they didn't use weapons. There was only three major fight scenes. Everything was them just kind of
Yeah,
avoiding
we got
punching
we
and
got
kicking.
we got burp jokes and we got
They
like
didn't.
Goo
They
Goo Gaga from the New Mutants. It's yeah,
Yeah,
they
and they
they
beat
lost all the grit.
they fight Shredder by blasting him with a sound wave from a keytar.
There's ninja rap, Steven.
There's also, I mean, that I could forgive.
Vanilla
I mean, that's
Ice.
just
Can
fun.
you? It's unforgivable.
The Ninja Turtles are supposed to be fun. I get it, but it was
Right, but if you have that sort of like every now and then, but when you have a whole just it's a cartoon of a movie, that just like how much more cartoon can we go?
right.
Vanilla Ice. He's peak cartoon.
Right, but
But
my point being that it's like you cast it, you throw spaghetti at the wall, and something sticks, and then instead of focusing on the spaghetti that's stuck, you like throw three different types of pasta. You're just trying to keep. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you
well,
should be iterating on what was successful,
let me
not changing it.
let me break it down for you in the most simplest terms here. When you look at films like Ninja Turtles, you have a really good start. You have like a sort of mediocre sequel, which at the very least,
It's a memorable and fun
right,
sequel,
the
yes, but
kid,
it's not as good.
right. As adults, we can look back and say that doesn't hold a candle to the first movie, in no way. But as kids, we watched the first film. It was a little bit scary, a little bit too dark and broody and gritty. Now it's more fun. There's better lighting. We can see shit in the day, uh, and we're riding high off the cartoon, and we see the cartoon in the movie. So as kids, I get it. Now there's that third movie that don't want to talk about
No,
because
we don't.
I know
We don't talk about that
it's not
movie.
real to you, which again, it's just not as good as
It killed turtles.
yes. Now you're forgetting the linchpin of horror. Horror can be made at a very low budget
Right.
and will almost always generate profit. Always. Because no matter what you do, there will always be an audience for horror movies. You can have the worst made horror film, and at the very least, it could break even. You could give it zero effort, have the worst script ever.
Well, you're assuming it gets put in a movie theater. Like,
Right,
there are a
right,
lot of those movies that come to like straight to
right. But
Blu-ray that
again,
are just
that
awful.
that's sort of that's why we see how much, like, we've had what? There's been 11 Jason movies and a reboot. We've had 7 Freddy Krueger movies and a reboot. We've had 4 Leatherface Chainsaw Massacre films and about 3 others as well in like a weird reboot double over, like rebooted it twice basically. We've had 9 Halloween movies, and we're on our 7th Chucky film. And and there was like 25 Hellraisers. Just too many of those. It's because they cost very little to make, and if you just put a modicum of effort, a little bit, you'll have an audience. People will go and watch it. So a few facts here before we close this out. Candyman didn't have a long lasting series. It's, we're going on 20 years now since we last saw Candyman in theaters. Well, if you don't count, it was a DVD film, but yeah, you get the idea. Didn't have the legs of a Freddy or a Jason or a Chucky or even a Critters or a Leprechaun for that matter. Those got more sequels than Candyman did. There were a few unrealized films in the franchise. There was talks of a potential 4th film in 2004, which is going to be in an all women's college, with again having another Candyman descendant, because that's the only beat we can, I guess, hit in this franchise. Have someone that he was related to as the main character. That's all we know. That's all that works. And it was gonna be like a Candyman in a snowstorm blizzard kind of a scenario. Then that never went anywhere. Then in 2003, when Freddy vs. Jason was big and was a massive hit in the box office. I mean, talk about horror that makes money. You take 2 IPs and put them in one film. That's you getting both audiences in one movie. That was the highest grossing film for either franchise was Freddy vs. Jason. So when Miramax saw that, they were like, "Bro, that's awesome. We can make money. We own Hellraiser. We own Candyman. They're both Clive Barker. Let's do a crossover. Let's get on that crossover versus money, bro."
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and Clive Barker was like, "Don't do that. I don't want you to do that with my shit. Please don't do that." Then there was a proposed Candyman Leprechaun crossover. But Tony Todd was like, "If you do this, I will have nothing. I want no part of it. Like, you will not ruin the character." Because Tony is a lot like Robert Englund for Freddy Krueger, where there is such a great respect for that character. And to see him devolve to such a bad level, he wanted no part in it. Like, if you do this, you recast, because I'm out. And Leprechaun decided to do Leprechaun in the Ghetto, 5th movie in the franchise. I guess that was where they went after that.
I remember that one.
Yeah, we all did. And they went in space. So now we come to the current year. We have a brand new film, Jordan Peele. We got Tony Todd back. We got Virginia Madsen. And I got high hopes for this. But, Steven, that is a wrap.
Let's get out of here,
For
Andy.
Candyman. Look at that beautiful thing.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Whew.
if you like what you listen to and you're listening on YouTube, give us a subscription. We would love that very much. Give a thumbs up on the thing. and comment. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so. We are at NDS Podcast. I am at Batchild27, and Andy is at PantsGuy. We have other shows that are on this very same channel, whether you're listening on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcast service of choice. Our next seasonal show, so this is it. Andy Explains It All is gone, but the next seasonal show is Dual Screens Versus. It is where Andy and I are going to bring on multiple topics to debate with a third guest who is going to be the moderator and awarding us points arbitrarily. And we will be declaring a winner. So that's going to debut in a couple of weeks. We're looking forward to that. And you can check out the Dual Screens podcast, which just went up with Davion, who created She Dreams Elsewhere, which was a fantastic episode. We recorded that a couple of days ago, actually yesterday.
Yep,
from recording this,
right?
It feels
are all sort of blending all together.
Yeah, it's bad. It's getting bad. And you can also check out the Dual Screens Gamescast, which records live on twitch.tv/dualscreenstream. So give us a follow there every Sunday night and posts on Monday for your listening pleasure on your podcast service of choice, including YouTube. And if you want to follow us on YouTube, it's youtube.com/dualscreenstv. And that's it. Andy, is there anything you want to tell the kids before we go? Or Patreon, right? Yeah, let's tell them about Patreon.
Yeah, do the Patreon thing.
Go to patreon.com/NDS podcast, just like our Patreon producer, Colton the Apprentice Nestler. We cannot continue to grow without all of your support, especially in these trying times. So if you do have a dollar to spare per month, you could get a free, well, it's not free, you could get an additional bonus episode. You get into our VIP Discord channel, and you get to vote on what we do for our bonus episode in our Patreon. Now, is there anything you want to tell the kids before we go?
Right. I do want to say that this has been a phenomenal season of Andy Explains It.
It's been a lot of fun.
I love doing this. I actually got an email the other day saying how much they love this series, which really touched my heart. The highlight was when I called you an idiot. So that's great. Because it was from someone named Steven. So they felt like I was talking to them when I called you an idiot. I would love this to live on in some form, be it a Patreon bonus show, an exclusive. Just it won't go away.
This is season one. Season one. It'll come back.
Season one. It'll come back. But I can't wait for season 2 to come back, and I have so many ideas of what I want to cover. But that's a wrap for season 1, I guess. Thank you for listening to my insane ramblings on things like Parasite Eve and Wes Craven and Stephen King and Candyman. It's really nice to kind of go into the things I love the most. It's the one thing I feel like I know the most about is just horror and bad horror and just horror in general. And to have an avenue and an outlet to sort of talk about it freely and openly means a lot to me. And I want to thank you as well, buddy, for making this a thing, and it's been a lot of fun every step of the way, and I can't wait for the next season. That's all I'm gonna say.
Excellent.
And I'll drink to that.
Indeed. I finished my margarita. Actually, I have a little sip. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, listener. Take care, and as always, please be excellent to each other.